Yeah, sure. Is this is it going to be live? Do you want visual on this?
Yeah, we're live. We're live now. But yeah, I mean, you don't have to. It's up to you. Yeah.
It's just that my camera looks a bit phased out on this.
No, you look fine. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Okay. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Typical Skeptic podcast. I'm excited to have my guest today. He's one of Britain's best-selling nonfiction authors. We have with us Graham Phillips. He's been known for 4 decades in historical investigation of adventure and history. He's written 18 books published worldwide, exploring mysteries such as the death of Alexander the Great, the secret life of Shakespeare, and the origins of King Arthur. Often described as the historical detective and a real-life Indiana Jones, Phillips has pursued legendary relics, including the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, and the Staff of Moses. Wow. In his latest groundbreaking work, he reveals evidence that the Zodiac had 18 signs traced back over 12,000 years ago to the animal carvings on Göbekli Tepe, the world's oldest known human-made structure. Using ancient Mesopotamian tablets and archaeological data, Phillips reconstructs the lost Zodiac and the original meanings for the first time in millennia. And with all that said, I'd like to give him a big warm welcome to the show for the first time. Graham, thank you so much for coming on. How are you?
Very well. Thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah. So they describe you in your bio as a real life Indiana Jones. Like you went after the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, and Staff of Moses. Were you able to find a lot of interesting information about them?
Well, yeah, I was able to find 2 of them, possibly. The Ark of the Covenant, I haven't found that yet. But with the Holy Grail, what the fascinating thing is that there was a castle in the centre of England where the people who lived there during the Middle Ages claimed to have found it during the Crusades years ago. And they kept this in the castle, and the legends and stories that have been told about King Arthur's knights searching for the Grail were all based upon this particular cup. And cutting a long story short, it was handed down through the centuries, and a guy in the mid 19th century, he had it, he'd inherited it from his ancestors. He eventually hid that, left a series of clues as to where it was hidden, and I went in search of that and discovered this small cup that was taken to the British Museum, and they said, well, this is 2,000 years old. It's made from a type of stone that comes from the Middle East, so who knows, it could be it. So yeah, I've had some exciting adventures over the years.
Wow, and that's amazing. Yeah, congratulations. And what about the death of Alexander the Great? Before we get into the Zodiac and stuff, like I love this story of Alexander the Great. I feel like I was connected to him in a past life or something. I even have Greek heritage in this lifetime. But what were you able to find out about the death of Alexander?
Well, Alexander the Great conquered half the known world, pretty much 3/4 of the known world in his time, in the 300s BC. And then after doing all this, and still in his early 30s, he made a kind of headquarters of his new empire in the city of Babylon, which is now near what is Baghdad in Iraq. He made this wonderful city of Babylon his headquarters. And while he was having a feast there to celebrate his conquest, he mysteriously fell ill and died. And it's long been suspected by various historians that he was poisoned by one of his trusted entourage. And my book was called Murder in Babylon. It was who could have killed him and what evidence was there. And interestingly, it was while I was researching Alexander the Great in that part of the world that I first came across reference to this early Zodiac that had 18 signs rather than the familiar 12 signs we have today, which kind of leads in neatly really to what we're talking about today.
Yeah. And when people think of the Zodiac, people also say the precession of the equinox too. They relate it to that. Do you think they're relatable?
Yeah, the Zodiac, as is for those who don't know the technical part of it, The zodiac is a kind of imaginary, if you like, band of sky through which the various heavenly bodies like the planets and the sun and the moon move. In other words, the planets, the sun, the planets, the moon, and the earth all orbit the sun in a roughly flat plane. And whatever particular star constellation is behind the sun, as viewed from Earth at the time of somebody's birth, that is the name of their birth sign, whether it's Aries, Aquarius, or whatever. So that's actually how the whole thing works. And there are 12 of those signs today, and those signs with the names like Scorpio and Sagittarius and so on were basically devised by the ancient Greeks.
That's interesting. Yeah. And then, like, why do you think the zodiac had 18 signs as compared to 12? Was it the Sumerians who made this up?
Well, yeah. Well, it was in an area called Mesopotamia, and Mesopotamia was a fertile area. It's not so much today, but climate was different back then. A fertile area that went from the Persian Gulf up through what's now Iraq and into eastern Turkey. And there were various civilizations that rose and fell there, like the Assyrians, the Sumerians, like you say, the Babylonians. And the first civilization started there. And it was in that particular area that this earlier 18 sign zodiac existed. The way I knew about it, first of all, by looking into the story of Alexander the Great's death, I found references by various scribes of Alexander that when they were in the Mesopotamian area, which is where Babylon was, they found reference to this 18 sign zodiac. And they thought that's strange because their sign had 12. Their zodiac had 12 signs. And in the British Museum, there's actually a 3,000-year-old inscribed clay tablet written in a language called cuneiform, which is what the early form of writing was in Mesopotamia, pertaining and referring to this 18 sign zodiac. It tells us it existed, but it doesn't tell us what all the signs were. And that really was the beginning of my research. That started way back in the 1990s for me to try and find out what were all these early 18 signs.
Yeah. And what do you, on a side note, what do you think about the stories of the Anunnaki? Like, because I know the cuneiform tablets tell a lot about the Anunnaki, and I don't think it's just, you know, some people, like, you know, they give Sitchin a bad name, or they'll say, oh, that's just Sitchin. But, like, you know, I've read the tablets myself, and there's a lot of reference to the Anunnaki in there. It seems like the Sumerians believed they were gods, and they were, you know, it seems in some cases that the Sumerians were like serving them, like they were like other advanced forms of humans or something like that. Like, do you have an opinion on the Anunnaki? And like,
well, I certainly know that just today there's this news kicking around on the internet that in Iraq there's been found this huge 12-foot tall mummy somewhere. Now, it may be a hoax, I don't know, but it got a load of people interested in saying, well, it talks in the Bible, talks about in ancient times there were giants in the earth, and the areas that the Bible's referring to when that is happening is places which were in Mesopotamia. And throughout the various, over the years, civilizations that rose and fell there, like the Babylonians, Sumerians, Assyrians, all have reference to these particularly tall giant people that used to exist way back in the past, the Anunnaki. Now, if this latest discovery turns out to be true, then maybe there's proof that these particularly large people, or maybe a race from somewhere else, did exist. But at the moment, I don't know.
Do you have any opinion on the Gilgamesh stuff? Like, it seems like they did find the body of Gilgamesh, or the tomb of Gilgamesh, right, or something like that. Like,
yeah, there's talk that this could be the tomb of Gilgamesh, which is this 12-foot tall. I think it's Iraq. It might be in Iran. All those areas were basically in what's Mesopotamia. I really don't know. I mean, the pictures I've seen look like they're AI generated, but that may be just because they haven't got pictures of it yet, and the people who are putting these stories up are just using that to attract attention to the story because they haven't got anything to illustrate it with.
Yeah. So how does Göbekli Tepe tie into this? Like, I tell you an interesting thing. There's a girl, her name's Slavka, that she goes by the name The Natural Sentient, and she was living in she's from Europe, but she was living in Turkey at the time. And she said to me, she said, "Do you want to do a live stream from Göbekli Tepe?" And obviously I'm here in Pittsburgh, but I said, "Yeah, if you want to travel to it, we'll do it." So she traveled to it, and she, set up her stream from there, and we live streamed it. And I actually saw Göbekli Tepe up close. Like, it was very interesting, to say the least. She also did one from the pyramids too. But I mean, yeah, like, I thought it was very interesting, but I couldn't make heads or tails about like what it was used for, what its purpose was, or like I'd love to get into Göbekli Tepe and how all this ties into everything. And yeah, and what do you think its purpose was and stuff?
Well, the whole thing is absolutely fascinating because as I say, the earliest civilization we know of is Sumeria, which was in Mesopotamia, in what's now Iraq, and that begins around about 5,000 to 5,500 years ago, and that's the earliest civilization anyone knows about. All throughout the world, various civilizations start up after that, like in Egypt and parts of India and so on. But that's the first. Now, before that, people are basically in what's called the Neolithic Age, which is the Stone Age. They lived in villages, and they lived in fishing villages and settlements, but they were using Stone Age tools. They built relatively simple stone and mud huts to live in. But I mean, any kind of structures we know about, even like Stonehenge, is only like 5,000 years old. The pyramids, 4,500. But Göbekli Tepe was completely unexpected. In eastern Turkey, where it was found pretty much by accident, and it consists of stone circles, sort of like Stonehenge, but T-shaped stones, which were buried in kind of pits in the ground, which are surrounded by walls. And there's a number of them. It's a whole complex of stone circles. But the amazing thing is that it's 12,000 years old. That's almost 7,000 years older than the oldest other forms of early civilization. So it kind of stands alone. And nobody's found anything yet really that's leading up to this or what came after it. It seems that maybe climate change or something forced the people there to move further south, and they no longer built those sorts of things. But what these stone circles, these big standing stones are like, these 12, 15-foot high standing stones, it's not just like Stonehenge where you've just got stone. They are carved with these intricate designs of animals. And it is those that finally gave us the clue as to what these 18 signs of the original Zodiac were. Because although earlier fragmentary evidence existed for this Zodiac, and some of the signs on it, like depictions of wheels divided into 18 segments with little symbols on them and things like this, a lot of this then tied up with these animals on these Göbekli Tepe stones to reveal that certainly one of the purposes of this ancient temple, if you like, was to in somehow help interpret the astrological zodiac signs as a kind of observation of the heavens. In other words, you stood in the middle of it a certain time of the year, you looked to a certain stone, you knew based on what was carved on that stone what the constellation was in that area, hence what the birth sign was of somebody born then, and other things. But that's basically it.
Wow. So what do you think they used it for that purpose? Like, does it show evidence of early astrology, would you say? Like,
oh, absolutely. There's no doubt. I mean, for example, there is holes in some of the stones that, remember, there's not just one stone circle, there's a number of them. They haven't found them all yet. I think there's 11 so far. Don't quote me on that, but there's certainly a lot. There's holes in some of the stones that the sun only on certain days of the year, important days like say midwinter day, midsummer day, shine through and right onto the face of a figure that's carved on the stone. That can't be by mistake. So it does show that these people were looking to the skies, and these stones, these temples, if you like, this megalithic complex represented the heavens on earth, the stars down here.
Wow. And then getting into astrology, what is a sun sign versus a birth sign? Like, and like, how should we start like learning how to interpret astrology? Like, for people that don't know how, like.
Okay, right. The first thing, a birth sign and a sun sign is the same thing. The sun sign is, now, if you imagine the zodiac, it's divided into 12 now. But the stars that make up the zodiac, I mean, there's about I think there's 148 really bright stars in the zodiac that you can see easily in the night sky, and they're the ones that make up the zodiac signs. But if you look at one of the signs, the constellations, say Aries, for example, all it is really is 4 or 5 stars in a row in a kind of ziggity shape. It doesn't look anything like a ram, and none of the other constellations really look anything like their name. Now, how it came about that the 12 sign zodiac we know today exists is that the ancient Greeks who named them, what they had done by that time is to divide the year into 12 roughly 30-day segments, months. Basically, it was the beginning of the 12-month calendar. But unlike our year, which starts at January the 1st, theirs, and like a lot of people in the ancient world, started the year on March the 21st, thereabouts, at the spring equinox, when day and night are of equal length. And that's kind of like the beginning of the growth season, really. And it divided the year into roughly 12 roughly 30-day segments. And the way the Greeks came about deciding whether somebody who was born when the sun was in that particular zodiac sign, that's their birth sign. And the reason being is it is thought that whatever that sign was influences you. So consequently, if you're born in the sign of Aries, the ram, you are considered to be a person who is, you forge ahead like a charging ram. You're basically the master of your flock. You are a person who is a good leader, and so on. Now, people today would tend to think, well, people being born under a sign, the sign itself is the stars are giving them the personality. But that's not how the Greeks did it. They thought over centuries and generations, they noticed that people born at that time of the year had what they considered ram-like characteristics. Take another, Sagittarius, the archer, represents somebody who was a great hunter, represents somebody who was good at a great wise person. That's what the centaur Sagittarius represented. And so what they did is anybody born at that time, they thought they tend to have more of those traits in common than other people. So we'll use Sagittarius as centaur to represent that particular time. But the zodiac could be divided up any way you wanted to. You could have 18 months if you wanted to. It wouldn't fit in with the amount of moons there are in a year, but even 12, the moons keep changing all the time each year. They don't just fit to that same pattern. So if these earlier people, and we know they did, had 18 signs, each of these months, if you like, would only be about 20 days each. So what they would do is somebody born in the first sign, say, for example, we know now from what's found at Göbekli Tepe and elsewhere, the first sign is what they call the spider. And they're all named after various animals. In fact, that's what zodiac means, of animals. The first one was the spider, and they had decided that somebody born at that time of the year, which goes from March 21st to April 9th, that person would, like a spider, spiders are creative. One are the only animals that create things that we can see, the web. they're also solitary. So people who are born in that sign tended to be more independent than others, and so on. So that's how it came about. And you end up with the first sign, which is the spider, 21st of March to April 9th. Second one, which is an animal called the aurochs, which is an early form of wild cattle, like a buffalo. That's April 10th to May 3rd, and so on for the rest of the zodiac.
Wow, that's so interesting. I was going over my questions here. So, why do you think it is that astrology works? Because it does seem like I've had my birth chart done a couple of times. Like, do you think it's because we're aligned with the stars? Like, literally, like because, maybe through quantum physics or something. Like, we're all connected and we're connected to the universe, and somehow, like, we're able to read our life path through the stars. Like, do you have an opinion on that, or what do you think? Like,
yes, because what skeptics have always said is, oh, the stars are much too far away to have any influence upon us. Just because the sun happens to be in that part of the sky when you're born, how could the stars light years behind where the sun is actually having a different effect on different people to have different personalities or characteristics depending on which of these signs, which of these constellations you're born in? Well, recent research has shown that it's not, maybe nothing to do with that. It could be the other way around. In other words, it's when you were born, it's the season you were born in that's important. Now, research done in 2021 at the Weizmann Institute in Israel has produced the first evidence that human beings undergo considerable hormone changes throughout the year. And it all goes back to a time when we were living in nature, our remote ancestors. So like most animals, they'll hibernate in the winter and they'll change their fur, and other living creatures, trees shed their leaves in the winter. And there's many other different changes that go on in nature. Now, humans evidently now they know are no different. There are hormone changes that would have made us different at different times of the year. In the cold, we're more resistant to the cold. We're more ready and prone to go hunting. Whereas in the summer, we're doing something more to do with agriculture and many other different things like this. So what the research at the Weizmann Institute said was, what's fascinating is that people who undergo the same period in the womb, same period of pregnancy, so you're a baby in the womb for 9 months, the mother during that time is undergoing certain changes, hormone changes, that actually have an influence on your eventual personality and characteristics. And that is slightly different to somebody born, say, a month later or a month later than that. So those who have shared the same or roughly the same period in the womb as somebody else will have similar characteristics. In other words, somebody born on, say, March 21st, the beginning of the spider sign, will have characteristics in common with somebody else born at that same time or thereabouts, because of the hormonal changes that were happening to the mother. So science is now actually showing that there is something in sun signs, or birth signs as you call them.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, that is really fast. I'm trying to, yeah. It's weird how everything like works out like that. Okay. Now let's get into the early signs. Like, what was the early zodiac that you've uncovered showing more than the current zodiac that people are using?
Okay, well, basically what it was a case of trying to figure out what these how these early signs were interpreted. We know that the ancient Greeks, say, for example, thought that somebody born in Leo was like a lion and they had leadership qualities and so forth. But what did the ancient people, maybe going all the way back to Göbekli Tepe, think people would share in common with the signs of their zodiac? And they start with the spider. We've got the aurochs, as I mentioned. We've got the mouflon, which is an early undomesticated wild form of sheep. You've got the vulture, the gazelle, the serpent, the wolf, the fox. You've got all these exotic creatures. Now, the problem is that they had no form of writing way back then. And so we don't know how each sign was interpreted. So what I did was I thought, okay, let's see if I can interpret what these signs are. How would it be able to be done? And I first came across this 18 sign zodiac, or knew of its existence, as I was saying, back in the 90s. It wasn't until about 10 years ago, in the last decade or so, that they've discovered Göbekli Tepe, that I knew could figure out exactly which particular signs represented all these 18 zodiacs, constellations. And then it was a case after that of how do I interpret them? Well, if, like the ancient Greeks, we know, decided that each sign was named after the kind of personality traits people born at that time shared in common, then it was obvious that all I had to do was, let's say, get a sample of dozens and dozens of people born under each sign, get them all to fill out a questionnaire, find out what their traits were like, find out if they were sports people, athletic, if they're creative, if they're good leaders, and so on and so forth. Well, that would have taken for years. I started doing a bit of this and asking a few people here and there and filling out a few forms, but I didn't have the time to do all this. And it would have taken forever. I mean, the Greeks, for example, we know have worked this out over generations, but it's only very in the last couple of years, very recently, that I was able to use AI to do this for me. I simply said to the AI, tell me 100 people, famous people, because online everybody's down there, they're all there, likes, dislikes, whether they're singers, actors, whatever, you name it, it's all there for famous people online. So, okay, give me 100 famous people born in the sign of the spider. Right, there you go. Within seconds, there it is. Okay, start to give me some of the following attributes in common. Are any of these athletes? Are any, and so on and so forth. And it's only because of AI now that I've been able to conduct this survey of all the signs to find out what traits people have in common, and hence put together this original Zodiac book.
Wow, that's fascinating. Let me go back to the questions here, and let me see here.
What sign are you, incidentally? I mean, when were you born?
I'm a Capricorn. Okay. It was January 11th.
January. Okay, I'll have a look on this here and see what traits you're supposed to have. January.
That'd be cool.
Say again.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
January 11th. Okay. According to this, you are the sign of the fish. Now, that might not sound much, like a goldfish thing. No, to the ancient Mesopotamians, the fish was considered a symbol of wisdom. I remember when I was a kid, they used to have these little kind of rolled up sort of leaf-like fish you'd put on the palm of your hand, that if it rolled one way, it meant one thing about you, and it rolled the other, you'd be something else. Well, this went way back to kind of fish shapes, a fish skin that they used to put on the skin in ancient Mesopotamia, and then if the heat of the hand would make it curl up in different directions, it would tell things about your future. And the reason they used a fish is, to them, the fish was the symbol of wisdom, new age, great learning. I mean, ancient people did this all the way through. The early Christians, for example, thought that used a fish to symbolize Jesus and their faith. So fishes tend to be people who think deeply about things. They're into metaphysics and philosophy and things that a lot of people, not so much the practical everyday things, they're more into things that are esoteric. There's some famous people here that were born under the sign of the fish, people who tended to do things in a completely different creative way. Like, for example, Stan Lee, the Marvel creator, right, the Marvel comics. Now, when he started, everybody said, you can't do this. There's already DC Comics, Superman, Batman. You've got no chance. But he said, I will do this, and I will do it in a different way. And he did, and he was extraordinarily successful. There are other people here that everybody said couldn't possibly succeed, and they did. Another person buried in that, born in that sign is Joan of Arc. She was at a time when women literally had no role in society at all. She led the French armies to defeat the English.
Wow.
And she did things in a completely different way. So that is the sort of thing that the person born in the fish sign are supposed to have in common. So there you are. You're unique, you're different, and you're philosophical.
Thank you, thank you. One of my viewers that's watching right now saw Tennessee, Kentucky Bigfoot says famous Pisces people include Rihanna, Albert Einstein, Drew Barrymore, Justin Bieber, Simon Biles, some well-known figures in music, science, film, sports, and entertainment. That's interesting as well, I find.
It is. I mean, after all, the Pisces is the fish as well. So yeah, that's an interesting point. The fish, that person is absolutely right. The fish was a symbol of creativity and artistic flair as well back in ancient times.
So do the Pisces and Capricorn usually get along then? Like,
well, put it this way, signs that get on with each other. The fish sign, okay, people who are the spider sign, for example, people who are the spiders, they're very creative. People who are the fish sign tend to be able to inspire people. So a fish and a spider would get on very well because the fish could come up with these really creative ideas, these really new, amazing, imaginative ideas, but the spider would then know how to put those ideas into practice and spin the web, so to speak.
Yeah, one thing I always found interesting was not the most recent girl I'm talking to, but or like the 3 women that I dated in a row before this one that I'm talking to now. They were all Scorpios, so like I dated 3 Scorpios in a row. Which it always started off like really great, and then it kind of teetered off. It was like so it was interesting to say the least. I don't know why I relate to Scorpios so much. I don't know what that is.
Well, I don't know. It's some of the things about these signs. They do have things that people have in common. So if they have the same kind of people you have the same problems with, it could be because of that. I mean, take another sign of this original zodiac, the swan. Now that's not in the zodiac we have now. That is from August 31st, which is when my birthday is, up till September 20th. Now, that is roughly where Leo and Virgo are today. But the swan was what it was back then. And the swan is an animal that is graceful in the air. And it's graceful when swimming on a lake. But on the land, it waddles around. It really is not happy on the land, but it has to go on land. And like those born in the swan, the person born in this particular sign between 31st of August and the September the 20th, they tend to be people who, until they actually get going, they can really get bogged down sometimes, like the swan on land. They don't quite know how to put things together. They tend to need somebody to come along and give them a kickstart, as it were, to say, well, why don't you try this, or come up with the initial idea, give them the give the encouragement. But once the swan is underway, they do absolutely great, like the swan that flies. And a sign that is actually very good at helping that swan get along and come up with some ideas that the swan can use to kick off is the fish sign, the person who has got this this inspiration and insight, which the swan people may not have. So therefore, those kind of people might get on.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So it's interesting to see how the different signs interact with each other, It's and like okay, let me ask you this, because we still have some time left. Like, what about Göbekli Tepe? Because I don't know many questions to ask about it. I'm not, like, am I missing anything? Like, is there anything interesting else that you can think of that, like, that might be that the audience might find interesting about it, that like we know, or that what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, you won't find much written about this because it's too speculative. But because I've researched so many different things, I can put different historical timescales together in ways that perhaps somebody who's just focused on Göbekli Tepe in that time period may have overlooked. Now, when we see the zodiac and references to it, we see going back in time, and we have like Babylon, which is where I said it was referenced. You go back to an earlier time, which is a place called Nineveh, which is part of an Assyrian civilization, went earlier than that. You go further north until you finally reach Göbekli Tepe in eastern Turkey. Now, that civilization was extremely advanced 12,000 years ago compared to anything else. It was way out there. There was nothing else like that for another 7,000 years. There must have been, and it must have been in northern Mesopotamia. It's just that the archaeology hasn't found it yet. It's a pretty dangerous place to start having archaeological digs in areas of Iraq and Iran. It just doesn't happen now. So this is one of the reasons a lot of it hasn't been found. Now, if you take this trend and go back further north, Göbekli Tepe, to be able to, the people who built it, to be able to carve these stones, to move them, to erect them, to do these intricately amazing carvings on the stones and build this complex, they kind of just come up with the idea overnight. There's got to be some precursor of people gradually, by trial and error, learning to do this over many hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. But we don't see that build-up. We know, like in Stonehenge case, for example, where the earliest people started putting these stones together. We know with the Babylonian civilization what they were doing earlier, and the Egyptians and so on. But we don't know this as far as the Mesopotamians are concerned, the people who built Göbekli Tepe. So, but going on the assumption that it probably came from further north. What's north of that? The Black Sea. Now, that's a huge area. I think perhaps all the Great Lakes could probably fill it. It's that big. Now, going way back, the Black Sea now is separated from the much bigger Mediterranean Sea by the Bosphorus, which is a strait, a big sort of very wide river, if you like, a good few miles across. But going back to the times just after the Ice Age, which is when Göbekli Tepe was built, the sea levels were much lower because so much of the world's water was tied up in ice, that there was a big a natural dam between what's now the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. And the Black Sea was then simply dry land. And they know there were civilizations there because they've seen evidence of what became of some of it on the shores. But when the ice began to melt around the time of Göbekli Tepe, when the ice got lower and the seas, in fact, the seas were 400 feet lower during the Ice Age than they are now. Eventually, the seas rose and came over this natural barrier, and a waterfall estimated to be 100 times larger than the Niagara Falls literally cascaded into this low-lying area for month after month and flooded the whole thing. And this is where people believe that the legends of the flood associated with Gilgamesh that you mentioned earlier came from, or the Noah's flood in the Bible. And any civilization that had developed maybe to create Göbekli Tepe was probably flooded under that. And obviously, to survive that kind of cataclysm, there's not much left. And it'll take a dedicated survey to find if there is an early civilization under the Dead Sea. Sorry, I keep saying Dead Sea. I meant Black Sea. Sorry, please forgive me.
Yeah, that's the Black Sea, right over there in the Mediterranean, right?
Is between Turkey and Georgia and up there. Sorry about that. Please rewind your minds and say Black Sea for dead when I was saying the Dead Sea.
Well, my friend Indigo Angel in the chat, she mentioned about Andrew Collins. He's from over your way too. He also wrote about Göbekli Tepe. Do you know him? Are you guys friends?
Oh yeah, we've been friends for years. In fact, we started researching. The reason we both got into to researching historical mysteries is it goes back 45 years, believe it or not, to 1979, and we both worked for the same magazine based in England that researched unexplained and the paranormal and that called Strange Phenomena. And that is how we both started off. And we've both written about the same amount of books since, I mean, about 23 or 4 or something like this. And we both have concentrated on some similar things. And it was thanks to his work at Göbekli Tepe that a lot of this stuff has now been found out. I mean, he's the go-to man in the world to read about Göbekli Tepe.
Well, you mentioned paranormal and UFOs. Like, it sounds like you started off in that. Like, you know, I cover that a lot on this channel. I cover a lot of paranormal, UFOs, conspiracies, like just like any alternative media podcast. But I try to cover everything. You know what I mean? I try to cover everything. In that realm. You know what I mean? Like like from ancient history to you know what I mean, right? But like what I was saying was, have you ever had a paranormal or UFO experience or anything unexplained, or a shadow person or a wraith or any kind of anything weird, anything unexplained ever happened to you? Did you ever see a UFO or anything like that?
Well, Andrew Collins and I started off as UFO investigators. We interviewed a lot of people who had unexplained things to do with things seen in the sky. We interviewed the very first contactees in England. The first time you'd got people claiming to have been abducted, we were interviewing them.
Wow.
Our friends of ours investigated the Rendlesham Forest case. So we started with that. When we were doing the magazine that was based in the Midlands of England, a place called Wolverhampton, the headquarters, the offices of the magazine was an old Victorian mansion. And some of the strange things that happened there, probably because so many people who were into the psychic stuff and people who wanted to do seances and things were all coming there, it sort of woke something up. And we had one of the most weird haunting cases at that place that's ever been. I mean, I can't believe that the first book, that I did, that was all about this, and Andrew, one of his first books, 2 separate books, all about the strange things that happened at that offices of that paranormal magazine. Basically, it's much bigger and much more amazing than anything that the Warrens ever did. I mean, it knocks Amityville into a cocked hat. It really does. It's much bigger. And the book that I wrote, The Green Stone, is probably the strangest paranormal story you'll ever read. And Andrew Collins, his book talks about it from a different angle, was called The Seventh Sword. So absolutely, that's how we got going. Then we came into more down to earth, sensible things, if you like historical mysteries.
Yeah. I didn't know if you saw this, but there's a new documentary out about Rendlesham. It's called Capel Green or something like that. Like, have you heard about this?
Oh, right. No, I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, supposedly it's new evidence and stuff came out, and it seems like a lot more is like linked to that case now. Like a guy that comes on my show a lot, James Bartley. He's been he's an American researcher. He's been researching like UFOs and military abductions for a long time and stuff, and alien abductions. There's a lot more that's tied into that case now than what anybody ever thought. You know what I mean? It's a lot. It's very interesting though. You know what I mean? Because you have an American, base that's in the middle of England, and it happens there. And it's like, there's a lot of questions that rise up between the British and the Americans and everything in between. And I just find the Rendlesham case fascinating in every single way possible. You know what I mean? I find Rendlesham more interesting than Roswell. I mean, Roswell to me is kind of old. It's like, it's like we've been there, done that. And then if you look at, there's like guys like Michael Schratt, for example, he talks about that there's been hundreds of UFO crashes. You know what I mean? So why we focus on this one Roswell is like beyond me, when there's been like ones in Italy and Germany and like over here in the United States and down in Mexico and, like Mexico, that's another thing. Mexico is a big hotspot for UFOs, but I mean, yeah, it's just interesting though. I love UFOs. I really get interested in that stuff, because I still don't know what they are. I'd like to wish I knew, but I mean, I've never met any.
Some of them certainly aren't. I mean, I stopped thinking that they were all nuts and bolts craft, all of them anyway, way back, because back in 1980, myself and a number of other people working for this magazine, 9 of us all together, we went to an old deserted place expecting to see a ghost. It was basically a ghost hunt. But while we were there was this strange ball of light came from a woodland nearby, about 50 yards away, floated in the air. It must have been about 10 foot across, literally above us. We all saw this floating. I mean, this is years before they had drones or anything that could account for this great white light, this glowing thing that just kind of exploded above us. And literally we were all you know, there was so much light around us that we were blinded for a few moments, and then afterwards it disappeared, and it was silent. When I say it exploded, it silently went and just disappeared. Now, that was one of the most amazing things, if not the most amazing thing I've ever seen. It was seen by 9 of us. Unfortunately, back then we hadn't got, you know, mobile phones and things to capture this on, but I don't know what that was. That would be what people would call a UFO, but we were investigating a haunting, so don't know what that means.
Wow, that's insane. Yeah, wow, that's interesting. So I'll go back to your book and stuff about Göbekli Tepe and the astrology. Like, do you feel like the early Zodiac was more accurate than the modern Zodiac?
Well, in some ways, yes. I mean, put it this way: if you've got a Zodiac of 12 signs, you've got 30 days approximately for each one, whereas this 18 sign one has got 20 days, so you're kind of concentrating down a bit more. You've got more signs to choose from, so they're going to be maybe a little bit more accurate. Also, because I've, you know, done something which couldn't have been done till today, which is use AI to literally do a cross sample of thousands of people, you know, famous people online, and, you know, look to see what they have in common. That's being done today, about today, for today's people. Whereas a lot of the astrology that's being done using the 12 sign zodiac is using something that was devised, you know, centuries ago for a different kind of time and different people. So yeah, maybe, possibly. It's certainly an interesting thing, and it certainly seems to work.
Yeah, and then I was going to say, like, what role would you think the Mesopotamians had in us understanding or getting our understanding of the stars?
Well, they pretty much started it as far as anything written is concerned. They're the first people to start making observations of the stars and appearances of comets and things like this. I mean, they didn't seem to have any idea about how far the stars were away. They thought they were painted on some sort of huge transparent firmament, as they called it, or sphere around the earth. I mean, people actually, they weren't the first. The Greeks were the first, I believe, to work out that the earth was round. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who think it's flat, but the Greeks worked it out mathematically. The ancient Mesopotamians thought it was flat, at least as far as we can gather. And they thought there was a kind of dome over the earth upon which were painted the stars. Or they were kind of like, in some ways, they thought that it might have been a dark substance that made up this dome with windows in it, and those were light was shining through from outside, what made up the stars. Others, and they were fixed on a background, and kind of it went around the earth. In other words, as the earth rotated, it appeared as if this firmament, as they called it, was moving, but all the stars stayed the same way relative to each other. But what was fascinating to the ancients is that there were certain things that looked like stars that we call the planets that seemed to move around within that backdrop. And that's where they got the name planet, which means wanderer, because they wandered around. And things like Venus and Mars and Jupiter, Saturn, they could see them moving around. And it was the ancient Mesopotamians that kind of figured out quite how these things did move around the sky, and began to believe that where these planets were in the sky at any given time could be interpreted as foretelling future events.
Wow. And then do you feel like that the early people that 12,000 years ago did you think they were practicing some form of astrology? Like, and who do you think was around 12,000 years ago? Like, if you had to guess, like, do you think I guess the better question is like, do you think it's not about what we've been told? Like, you know, like most people would think, like, when they think 12,000 years ago, they would think, well, maybe it was very primitive, but like, you know, we're starting to find out, you know, through like alternative history and everything else that, like, you know, maybe like things were more advanced. Maybe there was more technology than we're being told about. Like, I know this is all speculation, but like, so sorry, a lot of questions there, but like, yeah, like wherever you want to go.
Well, I think the one thing that covers it all is the rising sea levels after the ice age. For thousands and thousands of years, half the earth was covered in thick ice. Now, the ice in America, North America, went down as far as the Great Lakes. Anything further north than that was under about 2 miles of ice. I mean, 2 miles of the stuff. That's what still exists in places like Greenland today. Now, all that ice contained water from around the world that was tied up in that ice for millennia. And when it started to melt, the sea levels rose. Now, I mentioned before about the Black Sea and how come originally there was certainly people living there. There was certainly settlements that could have been extremely advanced, that was flooded when this ice started to melt. Now, if you imagine a 400 feet rise in sea level, then there's going to be a lot of land, especially coastal regions, that are going to be gone forever. They're going to be down way below the sea level now. And it could be there that there was many civilizations throughout the whole world on these coasts. I mean, most of the early civilizations settled at the coast anyway, because they were partly farming, partly fishing, so forth. So, you know, there could be lots of places that sank throughout the world. I mean, Greece and had its legends of Atlantis, which was supposed to be in the Atlantic. In India, you've got the legends of somewhere that people often call Lemuria, that was supposed to be in the Indian Ocean, and you've got what's called Mu, which is supposed to be in the Pacific Ocean. I mean, there are plenty of these legends all throughout the world of sunken civilizations. So, yeah, I think what ties them together is the fact that if you're going to add 400 feet of water the world over, you're going to lose civilizations. And Göbekli Tepe might be one of the last little bits of that civilization to survive before it kind of fizzled out completely.
Well, so you think there might have been like big existing civilizations, like you said, like Atlantis, Lemuria. Then we went into an ice age, and then things might have died off, and you know, and then as the ice melted, things started to repopulate. You know, like or
absolutely.
Somehow, I mean,
right? Another book I wrote was called Doggerland, which is the name of a place that used to exist off the north and east coast of Great Britain. It was a dry land area that's connected it to the continent, and it sank below the waves around 10,000 years ago. And now scientists and marine surveys are showing that there are stone circles under the sea that have yet to be investigated, that have got to be 7, 8, 9,000 years old, but they haven't got down to them yet. So there's going to be more to be discovered.
Wow. That's interesting. And then Jason has a question in the chat. I'll put it up. He says, why do you think they abandoned the excavation of Göbekli Tepe? Or do you have any?
There's a lot of weird political stuff goes on there. Andrew Collins was telling me about this. They were doing so much and then they stopped. I mean, there used to be a guy who was in charge of the Göbekli Tepe dig, who was very open. I mean, people like Andrew are doing research. They were very open with him and coming out, you know, share ideas. But the people who are doing it now are a bit more closed about what they do. I'm not too sure. I'm no expert on it. I know people have said they're not quite so open about things. It may be that they want to do some archaeology privately before they get round to telling people what they found, so that people don't interfere with them. But then again, there's lots of tourists go to what's been excavated. It's all under all under cover now. They've covered it over to preserve it. It's like a museum with open sides to it. But I don't know. There's maybe political reasons behind it. In other words, certain areas of certain peoples in Turkey. Well, you know, if you get something like in America, if you start excavating what may have been Native American land, people can start to get very funny about that, and they have to stop. There may be something equivalent going on in Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah. And while I have you here, like, I got to ask you about this. Like, what do you think about the pyramids, and not just the pyramids in Egypt, but like the pyramids all around the world? It seems like, you know, every continent has like even China, South America, Romania, everywhere has pyramids. And, even the Bosnian, they say those could be pyramids. They're like more like mountain structured, it seems like, or they're hidden underneath like bush or shrubbery, or but then there's water underneath those Bosnian pyramids. It's like healing, it's like. So do you have an opinion on pyramids around the world? I know you've done a lot of studies on recent history and stuff. Like, do you think that was from like past ancient civilizations that we're out of touch with, or or do you think it was like an ancient alien species that came and like built them and then left, or sorry,
yeah. Well, the first thing is that Graham Hancock, another English researcher, he's done
I love him. He's amazing. Yeah,
he's done a lot of research into how these civilizations may have come from earlier civilizations that preceded the Ice Age, for example. And that, the reason why they did all build pyramids is because it goes back to a time where they were all doing that somewhere at one place, or there was shared information across the world. What I find interesting is it's not just pyramids that seem to be in ancient civilization, but studying Mesopotamia, I find it astonishing that in things from ancient Sumer and Babylon and Assyria that date back, say, 5,000 years, you've got pictures of people holding these strange handbag type things. Well, nobody knows quite what they mean. They found those in Mexico, and they found them in China and India, almost exactly the same, from people who couldn't have possibly known each other, well, seemingly, and they're carved on the stones of Göbekli Tepe. This is something I think that does link these people together, more so than pyramids even.
That's amazing. Yeah. I wonder what it is. Like, I've heard people say that, those handbags represent like the Anunnaki seeding humanity or seeding life on Earth or something. But like, that's just a speculation. But then it's also, it almost looks like, if you look at those pictures of like the Sumerian ones that have the handbags, it almost looks like they have something on like a wristwatch too, or like some kind of.
They do. It is like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I've no idea what that is. I mean, was it some kind of wrist sundial? I don't think that would work, but it's some sort of symbol. It tends to have a big star on it, maybe representing the sun or something.
I get really deep into conspiracies, and I'm just going to share this with you. But like, someone told me the other day that like, there's alien tech from other worlds, and these bracelets are actually like alien tech. I know that's probably a little bit out there, in left field, but
what's something to beam them up with?
Yeah, you never know, right? It could be anything. I mean, who knows? It's yeah. Well, this was an awesome interview. Thank you so much, Graham. And how can people get your books and anything else you'd like to promote? And yeah, thank you. This was amazing.
Okay. Well, I've seen that people have been writing up, on the posting things on this, and some people have been looking up the green stone. Yeah, and they found my website. My website, grahamphillips.net. grahamphillips.net, and there you can find all my books. On the first page of that, there's pictures of all of my book covers. You just click on one of them and it'll give you all the information about the books. Like, for example, the green stone, you can click on that. It'll even show you there the videos I've made, a half-hour video about the really weird green stone story. If you hadn't heard that, you've got to look that up, to watch that video that I made on YouTube. So there's that. But again, coming back to the Zodiac book, basically, let's come up there. There you go. That's it. You come back to the original Zodiac. You just click on that there, and you'll find the links of where you buy it. The original Zodiac. That's my book. It's published in the States now, and it comes out in the UK in a week or so.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, yeah, but thank you so much, and we appreciate it, and thank you, and I'd love to have you on again.
I would love to come on again. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a